The tragedy of Cueva Los Angeles Cave. On May 30th, 1999, an unforgettable event took place. Frank was an experienced caver. He knew every rock and protrusion in the cave by heart. That is why he was authorized to guide others. He was going to take a group of 17 people into the cave and show them all its beauty and unique nature. The group included both experienced and inexperienced individuals. Among them was a woman named Elba. Elba was going into a cave for the first time in her life. Caves fascinated her, but she was also very afraid. That's why she was going to face her fears and enter the cave today. Frank agreed to let her enter the cave because of her desire. The team finished all their preparations in front of the cave at 12 o'clock. With Frank in the lead, the whole team entered the cave. The first step would never be forgotten by this team. When they entered, it was dark and damp. They easily made their way through the first parts of the cave. Now they had to pass through an area with a stream on the ground, which was relatively more challenging. This area was very easy for Frank. However, it would be a new experience for the inexperienced cavers in the team. Perhaps they shouldn't have had this experience. As they were moving forward, Frank suddenly stopped. Something was wrong. His experience told him that there was danger ahead. During the winter, heavy rains can seep into the ground from far away and cause sudden flash floods in caves. And inside the cave, the flood waters move forward in waves. Frank knew this, so they had to act immediately. Otherwise, they would be swept away by the powerful water current in the dark cave. As he predicted, the water level began to rise. The water, which had been flowing calmly just a moment ago, suddenly began to rage. Frank immediately directed the team to the slope on the side. This slope was the only way for the team to escape. The slope led to a safer road above. Everyone started climbing. Fears, screams, and the sound of water all mixed together. At that very moment, Elba, the inexperienced member of the group, was in shock from all that was happening. She was trying to climb the slope, not very confident in herself. And then the feared moment happened. Elba's foot slipped, and she fell into the water. She disappeared into the dark waters amid screams. The current was dragging Elba along, bumping her left and right. Frank, who witnessed the incident, jumped into the water without a moment's hesitation, like a true hero. He pushed forward without giving up in the rough water. After a tough struggle, he caught up with Elba. He held her tightly and grabbed onto a rock himself to prevent himself from being swept away. However, the hardest part was just beginning. A difficult struggle against the current would test Frank. They began to advance inch by inch. Despite the powerful current and the cold water, they managed to reach the slope. The other team members, seeing Elba and Frank, encouraged Frank with their inspiring words. Despite being exhausted, Frank pushed Elba upward with one last effort. The other team members above held Elba and pulled her up. Everyone let out a deep sigh of relief for a moment, but this joy was short-lived for them. Frank was trying to climb upward. However, he was very tired and had run out of strength. He managed to grab onto a rock with one last effort. Just as he was making one final push upward, a new wave hit Frank and knocked him into the water. The team members could do nothing but watch. Frank disappeared into the cold, turbulent waves and was swept into the depths of the cave. A backup guide team directed them to a drier and safer area. The team waited in this safe area, deeply saddened. Elba fell into a psychological breakdown. Frank had sacrificed himself for Elba. This first cave adventure witnessed a scene he never expected. The team waited in this safe area for 10 hours without leaving the cave due to the flood. The rescue team outside sounded the alarm and entered the cave. The rescue team first found the trapped team and brought them out. Frank's lifeless body was recovered on the same day. Little River Springs disaster. Date, November 26th, 2003. Little River Spring in Florida, where the disaster began. Jerry, 42, and Kane, 46, were two friends who were experts in cave diving. That day, they had a routine plan. They would explore the cave with their underwater scooters and then return before their air tanks ran out. According to the 1/3 rule used in diving, the air in their tanks was sufficient for approximately 80 minutes of exploration, and they needed to return to the surface before that time elapsed. The pair arrived at the site early in the morning. After completing their preparations, they began their dive. At first, everything was wonderful. The sun's rays illuminated the cave's crystal clear waters like a giant flashlight, and the atmosphere was peaceful. A guide rope left by previous divers was also in place. This rope is of vital importance in cave diving, since it is almost impossible to find your way underwater. Divers can follow this rope to avoid getting lost. As they moved deeper into the cave, the light dimmed. The environment grew increasingly quiet, and darkness enveloped them in tunnel-like passages. The powerful flashlights they carried could only illuminate a few meters ahead. Such underwater caves are extremely dangerous, even for the most experienced divers. When the cave walls are touched, sediment dislodged from the surface clouds the water and reduces visibility to zero. This is a deadly risk. The slightest mistake could cost them their lives. The pair reached a narrow area that deepened vertically, known as the well cover. This point was like a line of destiny. Jerry suddenly stopped. He was hesitant to move forward. Kane gestured with his hands, signaling, "Let's continue." Jerry nodded in agreement and moved forward. However, as Jerry passed through the passage, his foot touched the cave wall. This minor contact was the moment that triggered the disaster. After moving a few meters forward, Kane looked back and noticed that Jerry was not following. He immediately turned back. The scene he saw was terrifying. Everything was blurry and dark. Jerry was nowhere to be seen. Kane panicked, feeling around and reaching out randomly. At that moment, His hand touched Jerry, and he immediately grabbed him tightly. He felt a brief moment of joy, but the danger was not over yet. Kane was struggling to control the underwater scooter with one hand, so he decided to attach the scooter to the guide rope. This was a standard safety measure to prevent getting lost. However, after securing the scooter, when he reached out to Jerry again, he couldn't feel him. The real disaster had now begun. The water had become much murkier than before. Kane waved his hand from side to side, trying to find his friend. There was no light, no movement, no sound. Kane tried to attract Jerry's attention by banging on the oxygen tank to make noise, but that didn't work either. Despite trying for minutes, he couldn't reach Jerry. Meanwhile, his own air supply was rapidly running out. He had to head for the exit to survive. Kane carefully but quickly moved toward the surface, holding onto the guide rope. Meanwhile, Jerry had completely lost his bearings in the dark, muddy water. He had no guide rope and was helplessly drifting from side to side, hoping to find a familiar area. When Kane reached the surface, he immediately called for help. Two divers in the area quickly entered the water and began the rescue operation. When they reached the depths, they found Jerry. Unfortunately, Jerry had already drowned because his air tank had run out. The Caribbean Cave Disaster. Date: July 13th, 1991. The Caribbean. David and Alex were two close friends. The two young men were enjoying their vacation on the Caribbean coast. While walking on the beach, a beautiful girl approached them. She told them that there was a cave in the area and that there was a secret pool inside. The two excited and curious young men immediately set off for the cave, hoping to impress the girl. This was the mistake of their lives. They arrived at the cave entrance. David and Alex had no previous experience with caves or diving. However, hoping to cool off from the hot weather, they entered the cave. They were even more excited when the air cooled down at the entrance. However, just beyond the entrance, the cave tunnel sloped downwards at a 25-meter angle. The cave surface was wet, damp, and slippery. David hesitated for a moment. He was nervous. Alex convinced his friend, and they began their descent. The two friends slowly made their way down, holding onto the slippery ground. Even though their hands slipped from time to time, they continued to move forward. When they reached the bottom, a pool of water greeted them. They thought this couldn't be the secret pool they had mentioned, as the initial entrance was quite narrow. Alex wanted to continue. This request was risky for both friends. They put on their snorkels and jumped into the cold water. They swam through the dark and narrow cave tunnels. When they ran out of breath, they took a breath from the air pockets and continued on. After swimming for about 30 minutes, they reached a large area. This was probably the secret pool that the beautiful girl had mentioned. Alex and David rested for a while in this area where they could relax. Alex wanted to keep going a bit further to see new places, but David didn't want to. He said they should go back. This time, Alex agreed with his friend. They jumped back into the water to return. During their return, Alex's foot hit the cave surface. This is the most dangerous situation for these two friends. When his foot hit the cave surface, dirt spread across the cave floor, and now everything was dark. David continued straight ahead without changing direction. Alex, however, panicked for a moment and changed his route. He could no longer see his friend. He continued relentlessly without looking ahead. He veered off the path and continued through a different tunnel. He hurried forward, trying to reach a small air pocket. Moving quickly out of excitement and fear, he hit his head on a small rock. The air pocket was very small. After taking a deep breath, he had to dive back into the water. He tried to move forward, despite the pain in his head and his shortness of breath. Every second was crucial for Alex. His breath was starting to run out. Suddenly, he found himself in an air pocket. This air pocket was relatively larger. This place was of vital importance to Alex. David managed to find the exit by chance. He quickly got out of the water. When he looked around, he couldn't see Alex. His heart began to race. He couldn't decide what to do. Should he go outside and ask for help? He wasn't sure. He thought of the flashlight. He started shining the flashlight into the water. Maybe Alex could see the light and get out. Alex took one last deep breath and dove back into the water. His only hope was to get out of there and walk along the shore. He had no intention of ever embarking on such a dangerous adventure again. He began to see a light in the distance. Was he dying? He continued toward the light. Suddenly, he saw David in front of him. Taking a deep breath, he hugged David. The two, overcome with emotion, wanted to get out as soon as possible. They immediately began climbing. Despite the difficulty, they managed to make it out. When they emerged from the cave, the girl on the beach was there too. The girl had become anxious when she saw David and Alex enter the cave and had waited there. David and Alex mentioned how beautiful the secret pool was, and then moved on.